On this Inauguration Day episode of the Plutopia podcast, we discuss the past, present, and future of democracy. We also acknowledge the return of Felonious Trump, the 45th and 47th President of the United States. Our friend Dr. Roy Casagranda joins the podcast as we examine the incoming Trump Dream Team and its possible impact upon the nation.
The problem is the narcissistic maniacs that he's appointing to the government are the kind of backstabbing guys who don't have a coherent plan. They don't have a coherent policy. They don't know anything, right? That's one of Trump's problems, is that he just doesn't understand things. Like, I bet he doesn't know Canada and Denmark are NATO members. I bet he doesn't know that Greenland belongs to Denmark, so that if you attacked Greenland, you would effectively be going to war with NATO. I don't even know what's supposed to happen if a NATO member attacks a NATO member. Because Article 5 says if any state attacks a NATO member, all the other NATO members are instantaneously and automatically at war. There's no need for a declaration of war. So I don't think he can neglect his government of narcissistic maniacs. I think he's going to have to be there. And I can see them just really making a mess of things too. So it's possible that this will be okay. We'll have an incoherent 4 years where the United States basically is just sort of frozen and paralyzed, where the president is randomly threatening to attack this country and that country and the other country. It wrecks the US's reputation globally, but honestly, I don't know how much lower it can get anyway. So we're close to bottom.
Hey everybody, welcome to yet another episode of the Plutopia News Network podcast. Today, Scoop and I are, as always, deep in the heart of Texas. Scoop Sweeney, my partner there, and I'm John Lebkowski, and we're both kind of around Austin, Texas, a little blue island and a Red Sea. And our guest today, and this is kind of a follow-up. We recently had an episode where we talked to Dr. Roy Casagranda, and we're talking to Roy again, and we're talking to Roy from Dubai, where he is comfortable in weather that's probably less cold than it is here. Am I right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Is it warmer there? Okay.
Yeah, it's warmer. I think it was 55 when I woke up this morning. It probably got up to close to 70.
We were just like about 7 or 8 degrees off. We were in the 40s, but it's definitely getting cold here because in Texas it gets cold for 2 weeks every year. And this must be the 2 weeks. So Roy, when we talked before, we had no clue who was going to win that election here in the United States. And now we have our answer. We know who won. And the question is, what happens now? And Monday, I believe they're going to inaugurate Donald Trump as what is he now, the 47th President of the United States?
Yeah.
And my question for you is, considering all the things that we talked about that might happen if Trump actually stepped into the White House again, what do we really think? Do we really think that he's going to be some kind of all-powerful dictator, or is he going to encounter a lot of political friction?
Yeah, it's hard to say, obviously, based on his first 4 years, based on what we saw with Biden and how incoherent the Democratic Party has been in terms of opposing Donald Trump. I'm having a hard time imagining the US being able to create the kind of resistance that would be necessary if Trump can get his act together. And that's a big if, right? Historically, he hasn't been an effective leader. Like, name a policy that he's managed to pull off, and the list isn't long. So if he can, keep the sycophants that he's appointing to his cabinet and his White House staff, if they can be effective and actually try to execute the things he really wants to do, and he doesn't run into too much resistance from them, I don't know. I don't see him finding the resistance in Congress, and certainly not in the courts, which is a scary proposition.
Well, I wondered about that. I thought maybe he would have either opposition from within his own party. Well, obviously, Democrats are going to be opposed to him. That there might be Democrats on the one hand opposing some things, Republicans opposing other things. And the worst case for him would be some coalition of Republicans and Democrats. And when I say Republicans, I'm making a distinction of Republican from MAGA, because I
Right.
think that there are definitely there are definitely kind of two parties there. There are still traditional Republicans left. There's still moderate Republicans, or even less moderate, but still more traditional Republicans. And then there's a very extreme set of MAGA people who, I mean, what we just saw in Texas was that a coalition of Democrats and traditional Republicans managed to elect a House leader that the MAGAs totally opposed and didn't want. They had their own extremist guy that they wanted to put in as the Speaker of the House here in Texas, and that failed because of that coalition. And I've just wondered if something like that might happen at a national level.
We've had that coalition in Texas really since 2009. What it's done is it's made the Texas House of Representatives a moderate institution as opposed to the Texas Senate, which is a radical far right institution. So, I guess we're starting the 16th year of that tradition in Texas, but there's no such thing in the United States government. So I don't see that carrying over. And I think most of us had hoped we would see something like that in Trump's first 4 years. And we did a little bit because we saw, Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, John McCain, Murkowski, Sue Collins. They did occasionally stand up to Trump in the Senate, for example. Jeff Flake and Bob Corker announced they would not run for another Senate term because they knew they would be destroyed in the primaries by a MAGA person that Trump endorsed. So I think the lesson there for a lot of Republicans was, if you do this, it's the end of your career. And so, if anything, I think Trump has an even stronger mandate than he had in 2016. 2017, because in the 2016 election, he didn't win the popular vote. He did end up with both houses of Congress, but I think there was still a sense amongst most Republicans, or at least many Republicans, that there was a possibility of opposing him. And he didn't try to overthrow the government in 2016 or whatever, and get elected afterwards. I can't imagine a person attempting a coup d'etat and then actually winning election afterwards, not interpreting that as, oh, so you did want me to succeed on January 6th. Okay, I can make that happen now that you've reelected me and given me both houses of Congress.
I'm reminded of a prior administration that managed to drive me out of Texas back in 1972. And I found a souvenir from those days because I figured it was all over and I would just go and into my life in California. And as it resulted in me actually ending up back here because California was ending its own life with bad conditions. But I found this in the studio. Remember these guys?
Wow.
That was my shirt that I wore on the trip out to California when I'd finished covering for Pacifica Radio the inauguration. Well, not the inauguration, but the re-election of Mr. What's his name there? I won't even say his name. I kind of vomit a little when I have to say names of people like that. But there is hope from the despair we may have right now, that there are ways that these things can be rectified. These bad situations can be rectified, but it just takes a lot of faith and hard work by a lot of people. So it's not the end of the world, but it could be if you don't try and make a difference in what happens from here on out.
I definitely don't want to be the person who's saying, "Oh, the situation is hopeless," but I think that you're right. Like it would take a lot of hard work, and I think that there's a little bit of reluctance to do that hard work. Also, it's worth pointing out that, when when there was talk of doing an impeachment for Nixon, the Republican Party itself indicated to him that there was a high probability they were going to vote for his guilt in the Senate. So when he did the math, he realized, oh, I'm going to become the first president in history removed through the impeachment process. So the day the impeachment hearing started in the House, he resigned rather than face that. Trump was impeached twice, and both times for something way worse than anything happened in Watergate. And the Republican Party had one guy peel off in the Senate on the second impeachment, and only for one of the two charges he was brought up for. And so as long as the Republican Party is trapped by this guy, it's been captured by this guy, I don't see the kind of bipartisan support for upholding the Constitution that I think we saw in 1973 and 1974. And so that's where if you're waiting for the Republicans to save the day, I think that's a serious mistake.
Yeah, that was a different Republican Party back then.
Totally.
And they actually still had some values, and it was a different Democratic Party that was in the process of become the hardcore Old South Democrats became the Republicans.
Yes, that's what happened.
Pretty much overnight. I watched it happen at a convention. It's like, well, this isn't good, and it wasn't.
Yeah. The solid core that always voted Democrat was the conservative South, and now that's the solid core of the Republican Party, and it matters. And
so is anybody in a position to save the day?
Who?
Is anybody?
I mean, the answer is absolutely. The American public could do it.
That's what I thought.
The American public could do it. What was that?
Oh, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, but go ahead.
The question is that, the American public could have done it in 2024 in November, the second Tuesday of that November too. And where were they? What was so pressing that they didn't find time to go vote? Now, one of the things that's come up in I forgot who did the poll. YouVote? It might have been YouVote. Anyways, there was a poll that was conducted that showed that 29% of people who had voted for Biden in 2020 who didn't vote for Trump in 2024, 29% of them said that they didn't vote for Biden because of the war in Gaza. So it wasn't just a function of apathy that caused Trump to get elected. There was also a rebellion against Biden's policies, at least his foreign policy. And I think that's a huge problem for the Democratic Party.
That seemed a little irrational to me.
What was that?
Oh, I just said it seemed a little irrational to me.
I mean,
is Trump gonna be a better choice than Kamala Harris, where the war in Gaza is concerned?
I think the answer is no. And I actually tried to have this argument. If it seems to me, if you're going to be mad at a president for what's happening in Israel, you need to be mad at every single president from Truman to this moment, including, by the way, Trump, who was president for 4 years and was just as culpable as Biden and Harris in terms of U.S. foreign policy in Palestine and Israel. So from a rational actor standpoint, the answer is, yeah, it was irrational to vote or to fail to vote for Kamala because you wanted to punish the party, and then next thing you know, you're going to get Trump, and he's going to put in people like Mike Huckabee and Marco Rubio, who are both like foaming at the mouth Zionists who think that Arabs should be exterminated from the earth. And so, that was a clear miscalculation at some level. The problem is politics are never rational and never about rationality. And so expecting people to act rationally in politics is misplaced.
Well, did you think that Trump is going to be able to actually accomplish all of these grand plans that he has? That's what got him into trouble in, Trump 1.0, was he promised a big border wall and Mexico was going to pay and all of that. And if he doesn't deliver this time, it could come back and bite him in the ass, don't you think?
I don't know. I mean, unless they change the Constitution, he's got 4 years, right? And that's all he can do is 4 years. So at some level, I don't think he would care. Like, what's the point? There's nothing at stake. He just rides out his 4 years. Getting elected helped him avoid going to prison for the felonies he's been convicted of, and all the other investigations that were going on were derailed. He's so old that 4 years might be his life expectancy. And even if it's not, what are they going to do? Throw this 80-something-year-old man in prison for how many years? Like, at the end of the day, I think any benefit he was going to get from being president again, he's going to get from being president again. And he doesn't care. There's nothing at stake.
Well, you just talked about his life expectancy. That just gave me a little shiver there. What happens in that event? I mean, who's good?
Oh, yeah, that he doesn't make it to the end of the 4 years?
We've got President Vance. How long is that going to last?
Well, we get President Hillbilly Elegy, right? So it'll be amazing.
Well, I kind of had a theory that Trump wasn't really going to do very much himself other than play golf. And that pretty much by electing Trump, we just turned things over to this crazy team of people that he's been, like the cabinet that he's building and so forth. And maybe the Project 2025 guys. Trump claimed that he had no interest in Project 2025, but on the ground, it seems that that's incorrect. It seems that that he's somewhat behind all of that stuff. And of course, there was 900 pages there of extreme weirdness. Uh, but my wonder is whether Trump is going to sort of like recede into the background, because the main thing he wanted to do was get elected. And he has a lot of things that he said he wanted to do, but the question is, does he have the energy to do it? Or is he just relieved he's elected and ready to play golf? And if that's the case, and he sort of leaves it to all of these other people that he has pulled into his administration, are they going to be able to play nice together? Or are they going to be able to kind of hold it together and have a coherent approach of any kind? And certainly the question, people predicted that if Trump won, he would become a dictator. He said a dictator on day one, but that was some kind of weird joke he was making. So question, could we have a dictator that's a really low energy dictator?
I mean, sure, there was Benito Mussolini. He was basically that, right?
Yeah.
Mexico had a Trump equivalent in the early to mid 1800s. His name was Santa Anna, actually. And Santa Anna basically did something similar to what you're saying. When he was elected to his first term, he disappeared for about a year. He just went to his hacienda and, I don't know, probably beat his peasants. And then what he did was he decided to do a coup d'etat against his own government and came back to Mexico City and effectively overthrew himself, which was fascinating because it's so similar to what happened on January 6th, right? Like the sitting president's trying to do a coup while he's still the president to prevent the next guy from taking over. And then Santa Anna would flitter in and out of Mexican politics periodically because, right, he'd fall out of favor and then he'd lose power and then he'd come back in and he was like this metastasized cancer that wouldn't go away. And he really messed Mexico up for quite a few years. And so in a weird way, yeah, I could totally see him like disappearing for a year, playing a bunch of golf. The problem is the narcissistic maniacs that he's appointing to the government are the kind of backstabbing guys who don't have a coherent plan. They don't have a coherent policy. They don't know anything, right? That's one of Trump's problems, is that he just doesn't understand things. Like, I bet he doesn't know Canada and Denmark are NATO members. I bet he doesn't know that Greenland belongs to Denmark, so that if you attacked Greenland, you would effectively be going to war with NATO. I don't even know what's supposed to happen if a NATO member attacks a NATO member, because Article 5 says if any state attacks a NATO member, all the other NATO members are instantaneously and automatically at war. There's no need for a declaration of war. And so, at some level, I can see him going to his hacienda in Mar-a-Lago and beating the undocumented immigrants that work there, and then ending up in a situation where he realizes if he's not there beating the members of his White House staff and the cabinet, they'll just fall apart. So I don't think he can neglect his government of narcissistic maniacs. I think he's going to have to be there. And I can see them just really making a mess of things too. So it's possible that this will be okay. We'll have an incoherent 4 years where the United States basically is just sort of frozen and paralyzed, where the president is randomly threatening to attack this country and that country and the other country. And it wrecks the US's reputation globally. But honestly, I don't know how much lower it can get anyway. So we're close to bottom.
Well, it looks like China's not going to be real thrilled with the Supreme Court decision to force the sale of TikTok.
Yeah.
That upset a lot of millennials and Gen Xers who rely on that for, I guess, for whatever. I'm not a big TikToker, but it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with that, because, he wanted it to happen. He wants Musk to take it over, but I don't think that's going to happen. But now that you have a Supreme Court ruling, something has to happen.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you can just get around it with a VPN. That'd be my guess.
Well, I don't
Well, I mean, that's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, I might be in a country right now where Zoom doesn't work because the government disabled it, but maybe I might have a VPN going. I'm just saying. There's a VPN that says I'm in
Good
Houston.
for you.
I'm not.
Well, there's a law in Texas that says that porn sites have to verify the ages of kids, and some of the porn sites, there was one I heard about one of them that just said it wasn't going to operate in Texas anymore.
Oh,
So basically they blocked any traffic coming from Texas.
Yeah, that's porn.
And I believe I heard that there was a real increase of VPN sales in Texas after that happened.
yeah. I can
I mean, you
imagine.
can use a VPN to get around those kinds of restrictions. But the question is, what kind of restrictions are they thinking about to prevent Americans from using TikTok? Is it merely going to be a block, or is there going to be something more aggressive they're going to do? I hadn't even thought about how enforcement would work.
Well, usually
Yeah.
it's done with geofencing, which is something that happens to a lot of different applications where they don't want certain countries to access the site. So they would, it can be done from either side. The country can enforce a geofence around an application. Not successfully, but they could try.
Sure. I'm also wondering, like, what happens to the people who have a revenue stream from TikTok? Let's say they have an end around on it. They still have to pay taxes on their income that they're earning from that. So that, of course, would be, oh, you earned income from TikTok. TikTok's banned. So I wonder, I suspect that those guys will have the harder time getting around it than the customers.
Yeah, those people are actually panicking because they're losing their revenue stream, because a lot of those businesses that operate on TikTok, that's their only outlet. They don't
Yeah.
have any other, they don't have a store. So that's it.
Well, if they just keep streaming, I wonder if this means that they're in some kind of legal jeopardy themselves.
I think if you're getting an
I don't really
income, then
know.
it would be easy to trace that you were still streaming. So that I would assume that there's some kind of legal jeopardy there. Uh,
Yeah, I guess we'd have to look at the law to see what it actually says. But regardless of all that, apparently the Supreme Court, they haven't made their decision yet, but apparently they're leaning toward uh, enforcing the ban or saying that the ban is a good thing, and something is going to have to happen. And from my perspective, it's probably something healthy. I think to the extent that you squelch or squash any of these big corporate social media sites, maybe you're doing a good deed
I mean,
because
there are
they're
nine
all
Supreme Court
subject to
justices.
shitification.
There are nine Supreme Court justices that may agree with you because it was a unanimous decision
Yeah.
to uphold the ban. So
Oh, did they decide to uphold it? I didn't even hear that the
yeah.
decision was
Yeah, that just happened
made
this morning. Uh,
10 minutes ago. Okay.
and you know,
Well,
the whole thing
so
with the
they
social
are
media,
banned.
yeah, the social media giants are all kissing the toe of the new emperor now. They all have donated to his inauguration.
And the rumor is that Chinese officials have already talked to Elon about him possibly buying TikTok. So
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the Chinese would be happy to sell it to Elon, but Elon doesn't really want to buy it. So then the question is, who would buy it? The word I heard was that Mark Cuban is toying with the idea of using the AT protocol, which is what Blue Sky uses, to build a version of TikTok, a domestic version of it, but something that has no no ties or attachments to TikTok, and that people could just migrate there. But it's really hard to tell. I mean, people are seriously talking about leaving Facebook right now, and tons of people have already left X, which was formerly Twitter. And what's actually happening is that the whole social media world is sort of in flames right now. It's sort of like kind of falling apart. Uh,
now that's a
and
dream come
that,
true.
yeah, that's not a bad thing, because social media has so many downsides to it in the way that it's been, in the way that we've evolved it to become just a way to capture attention and just a way to sell attention to advertisers, uh, disregarding the well-being of the actual users.
Maybe even intentionally making the well-being of the actual users worse off in the hope that they'll become, even more addicted to the whole setup, and then you can feed them even more advertising, which is right why there's this tendency for people to fall into these information wells.
And of course, you can feed propaganda into those streams of information on all social media. The question is whether propaganda is really effective. Cory Doctorow refers to this idea of people being vulnerable to propaganda. He says that it's like saying that there's a mind control ray. He says, well, there's no mind control ray, and people are not necessarily going to be sucked in by bullshit that they're fed through social media. But I don't know. I see a lot of bullshit in social media, and it appears to be having some kind of an effect.
I think what it does is it works on a person who's already leaning that direction. So you the propaganda that's affecting the MAGA crowd isn't going to affect us, but there might be something that's coming from a different direction that's tuned into what we're more interested in that we might get affected by. And I think that's the problem with the spiral in that you get with the social media is they notice that you kept clicking this, space aliens have taken over the government links. You're really interested in that. So they keep feeding it to you, feeding it to you, feeding it to you. And since that was your original inclination anyway, it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling propaganda or self brainwashing.
Yeah, the whole idea of MAGA propaganda being a profit center has been disproved by Truth Social because that has cost Trump and his associated financiers a lot of money because basically it's just a big device to eat up all the venture capital that has been sent his way. It has very little in the way of actual income. The last financial report that I saw from Truth Social was that it was hundreds of millions of dollars in debt and about $1 million in revenue for the previous year, and that
Wow.
you can't sustain that even with your MAGA greatness.
So I'm wondering about policy positions. So what what economic policies do we expect from the Trump administration? What have they signaled that they're going to do with the economy going forward?
Well, we were told we were going to get huge tariffs. And of
True.
course, tariffs are just going to be taxation on the consumer because it's not like the people exporting the goods to the United States are going to eat the cost of the tariffs. So that'll just cause another round of inflation. And then I have to ask, what are we going to do with the revenue from that? Is it going to go towards paying off the debt, or is it going to go towards Trump's golfing holidays? And then, like, is he going to spend a lot of time in really expensive resorts and then make the the Secret Service, the Fuhrer's bodyguard, the president's bodyguard, is he going to charge them exorbitant prices to stay in his luxury hotels? And then is that where the revenue is going to go? Like, I'm fascinated by that. But also, since the United States economy is a consumer economy, not a producer economy, and that the basis by which we operate is that some U.S. companies and some foreign companies make goods very cheaply in China, and then they're brought to the United States, and then sold to American consumers. That's the cycle that drives our economy. If you put those tariffs on there, then what happens to the economy? Like, how is it going to function? I'm fascinated. I think this is a great experiment. I'm glad I'm not there to be part of it, and I can just watch the numbers roll out from here. But I'm looking forward to seeing how y'all go.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if this tariff thing is going to blow up in his face. I mean, I just don't see how it can work the way that he's described it. Tariffs are usually pretty targeted, aren't they?
I mean, they will be targeted. They'll be targeted at imported goods. I suspect he won't pull it off. I think it'll be like the wall, right? Like the majority of the wall that he built, I want to say it was like, what, 95% of the wall he built was actually Obama constructed wall that was torn down and then rebuilt. Because Obama wasn't just the deporter in chief, he was also the Great Wall creator. So I think the tariffs will
Well,
kind of go down that way.
speaking of deporter in chief, how about the immigration mass deportations? We've been promised that millions and millions of undocumented aliens are going to be rounded up and deported as soon as Trump is in office. Is that really practical? Can he really do that? And what will the economic effect of that be?
I mean, the economic effect would be catastrophic. Who's going to do the roofing? Who's going to pour concrete? Who's going to lay your block? Who's going to pick your blueberries? Like this, there's no way this works. And then the impact on things that I don't even think the average American realizes will be catastrophic, like wine industry. Uh, you know, growing grapes isn't just a matter of having a grapevine and then you come pick the grapes periodically. You have to prune the grapevines in such a way that you maximize the amount of sweetness. And to do that requires years and years and years of training and experience and being in the field and intuition. And almost all of that is managed by immigrant Mexican farm workers. So, like you can forget the American wine industry after this is done too, if you pull it off. In the 1800s, Germany, so the brand new Germany, right? Because Germany is 95 years younger than the United States, 1871. Germany decided that it wanted to get rid of its undesirable population, which was Poles. I know where some of your minds probably went. It was actually Poles were their original undesirables. Like the UK when it did Brexit, it was Poles. They wanted to dig the Poles out of England. So Germany had 6 million Poles living in Germany, and it began a mass deportation project. And if I remember correctly, they did it for 30 years, but don't quote me on the 30. I might be off on the number of years. And at the end of this, they spent, hundreds of millions of dollars in today dollars worth of German marks trying to do this. They managed to bring down the Polish population by a net 30,000 people. So if Germany couldn't deport 6 million Poles, the United States deporting 11 million undocumented immigrants sounds outrageous to me, because Germany is at least 20 times more efficient than the United States in everything it does. So I can't even imagine how it would look.
Yeah, well, the whole problem with doing war basically with Mexico, that's what it amounts to as economic war, is a large percentage of our food is imported.
Yeah.
But, especially into Texas, it comes from Mexico. If you want your
Yeah.
guacamole, you're not going to have any, because that's where the avocados live.
Yeah.
But
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, they just don't seem to understand how all of this works. It sounds great to the MAGA masses. Yeah, we're getting rid of the Mexicans, but the economic impact is horrifying to anybody that has any kind of business that has benefited from these people coming and bringing their skills to this country.
One of the things that Trump targeted was car imports from Mexico. So one of the places that'll be hit really hard is Texas. This is going to sound crazy. Laredo, Texas is the largest port in the United States. It's bigger than LA now. So many goods come across the Texas-Mexico border through Laredo now that Laredo imports a total of $320 billion a year. So just think about what a tariff on Mexico imported products would do to the US economy. But here's the funny thing. He specifically also targeted cars. 40% of the cars coming across the border are GM and Ford, because I guess he doesn't know this, but there's no such thing as American cars. There are NAFTA cars. The average US car part crosses the US, Mexico, and the US Canada border 9 times before it's finally installed in the final product. The US cars are a Mexico Canada product with the US helping. So if you put tariffs on cars imported from Mexico, you would cripple the US auto industry. And since he's the guy who renamed NAFTA the USMCA during his first term, I think it's hilarious that he doesn't seem to know this.
Well, the whole war against drugs that he's planning to conduct, that's never gone well for any administration. He ignores the fact that most of the fentanyl that's coming in is not coming across the border on the backs of poor immigrants. It's coming in those ports on shipments that are supposed to be cleared by his border security. And it gets right through because it's an impossible task to locate all these things, because the times that he's shut down the border in Trump 1.0, it was horrifying. It's, economy of Texas especially just came to a standstill because trucks weren't getting in from Mexico.
Yeah.
But he's going to try it again.
And according to DEA, the drugs that are coming in the United States aren't coming from people smuggling them through, through the border. It's coming in through the ports. It's not right. So like this idea that somehow there's this group of, evil immigrants who are illegally coming in and they're bringing their crime and their drugs is actually just totally wrong. The big problem is U.S. citizens who are bringing the drugs across by themselves. And of course, U.S. citizens commit more crimes than immigrants. So,
well, I think that the obvious solution is statehood for Mexico and Canada. Just make them part
that's
of
the
the
plan,
United
isn't it?
States.
Yeah, I think he
That's what I
said
think it
Canada will
is.
be the
Yeah.
51st, Mexico will be the 52nd, Greenland will be the 53rd, and Panama will be the 54th. That's how I understand it.
Yeah. There
Yeah.
you go.
There you go.
No more borders.
No more borders.
Well,
They'll
I mean,
have
I guess we're
huge
just
say.
extending the borders farther.
They'll have a huge say in the House, but the Senate, they'll have meaningless voice.
Oh, my Lord. Well, how about, okay, I've got another policy, healthcare policy. He says that they need to change the Affordable Care Act and replace it with something better. And he's been working on that really hard for 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah.
Have they got something? You think they're going to do it?
So from what I can
Are they going to
tell,
give us socialized medicine?
they have nothing coherent. Now, that doesn't mean they won't come up with something. Wouldn't it be hilarious if they just copied Canada's system and gave it to us? But I mean, there's plenty of places to go to if you're looking for examples. The whole world has a socialist medical system except the United States, right? Like you have 96 states to look at and see what everybody's doing right and what they're doing wrong if you wanted to do it. I can't imagine, based on Trump 1.0, that there's going to be anything coherent that comes out of this. And traditionally, of course, it's the Republicans who came up with the idea of Obamacare in the Reagan administration. And then it was a Republican who executed it first, because it was originally called Romney Care when he was the governor of Massachusetts. So there's a little bit of irony in how much opposition the Republican Party has had to the Affordable Care Act. But if their original goal was to cancel it outright in the first term, if they replace it, what are they going to replace it with that would be somehow better for the American public, but do everything the Republicans wanted to do, which would be cut taxes for the rich? I don't see how you can have both, right? Because you can't fund a program with libertarian fairy dust. It needs to actually have resources and capital.
Yeah, I've never understood their thoughts on healthcare. None of that has made sense to me. I mean, I've heard them complain about the Affordable Care Act without really sort of describing to me the nature of their complaint. But I think the nature of their complaint is that they just don't want government involved. And if you're going to create something better, yet not have government involved at all, I mean, that just kind of doesn't follow. If government is going to make healthcare better, then government is going to be involved in some way.
Yeah, I mean, the big
Mysterious.
mistake with the Affordable Care Act was that we didn't do Nancy Pelosi's House plan, which was to have a government insurance policy that would not necessarily go for any form of profit, so that all the other insurance policies would have to compete with that, and that force them to bring their prices down.
That's a great
So
idea.
in a way, we kind of
Let's do that.
yeah, well, the Senate sabotaged that, and they were forced to give up in conference committee. They were forced to give up the government plan. here's another thing that I think is interesting is one of the great things that Affordable Care Act did was got rid of the pre-existing condition clause that insurance companies were doing. Because when you think about it, literally anything that goes wrong in your life is essentially a pre-existing condition, right? You break your arm, well, there might have been a little bit of a flaw in that spot on your bone, meaning that the arm break was a pre-existing condition. And so the insurance companies were just sort of arbitrarily calling it pre-existing condition as a mechanism to prevent them, make it so they didn't have to pay. And it was literally killing people. The state of California estimated that 45,000 people in the US died every year from an insurance company basically refusing to pay and that person not getting treatment for a curable disease. And the Affordable Care Act did not get rid of all 45,000 of that, but it got rid of a big chunk of that. And so there are literally thousands of people alive today because of it, which I guess if you're a nihilist is bad.
Well, Bobby Kennedy Jr., he's going to save us. He's going to have free ivermectin for everyone, and there'll be billions for brain worm research. And
they have apple flavored ivermectin in case.
Good.
Yeah. Who doesn't want it?
Do you think that is actually going to fly? I mean, that's some crazy stuff that you're going to have to defend in front of Congress. So far,
yeah, I'm really interested to see how this rolls out because, on the one hand, Bobby Kennedy has talked about stuff that I think most people would agree with, like let's look at some of the GMO foods and maybe we need to start getting rid of some of those. And I'm on board. I'm ready to do that. But then on the other hand, he says that vaccines cause autism. And there's no scientific evidence that confirms that. And last thing we need to do is get rid of herd immunity. And over the last few years, we have seen the rates at which Republicans are vaccinating their children plunge. And we are starting to get dangerously close to the threshold point on herd immunity on some of the diseases out there. And of course, we've had outbreaks over the last few years. So having a guy at the head of U.S. health suggesting that we don't need to vaccinate could have bad consequences. I don't remember
claims
the
that
number.
that's not his position. He says that's not his position, but I think his position is that it should be up to you whether you vaccinate or not. And that kind of doesn't work in a public health context because herd immunity depends on everybody getting vaccinated, right? Or most people getting vaccinated.
I think it's 93%.
Like kids. Yeah.
I think you need something like that. There's a number similar to 93% have to be vaccinated for you to have herd immunity. So if 10% of people decide they don't want to do it, that you just lost herd immunity.
Well, the only place I know of that, I was just going to say, the only place I know that vaccines are actually mandated is for children to go into a public school and attend a public school. They have to get a certain set of vaccines. And that just makes sense. You're throwing a bunch of kids together. They're all vectors for disease.
But now the Texas Republicans want to do away with the public schools. Let's give all that money to those private schools and those parochial schools that don't require you to do any of those things.
And I'll tell you exactly what will happen if we get rid of the public schools or we do vouchers and allow parents to put their kids in a private school with money that should have been funding the public schools. Not only will all those rural counties lose jobs because the ISDs are the number one employers in those rural counties, what'll happen is you'll lose any standard of education because if you're a parent and you're sending the voucher to a school and your kid is walking home with C's, you're going to pull them out and put them in a school where he can walk away with B's. And schools will then realize really quickly that it's catastrophic to hold their students to any kind of standard because they're losing too much revenue. And so what'll happen is the education for the bottom 80% of the population will bottom out. The top 20% will have enough money to send their kids to decent schools, and they'll do fine. So this will just make the gap between the rich and the poor even worse because substandard education is not a great way to get a job in the end.
So the next thing that I'm concerned about is the climate hoax. Um, they're going to
Okay,
address that, right? They're going to do
just
something
to
about that hoax.
just to start with, I want to say thank God there's no global warming. Can you imagine how bad the LA fires would be if there was global warming?
Really?
Yeah, it'd be the whole place would burn to the ground.
Well, that
I
is kind of interesting. I wondered about the connection between those fires and climate change, and there could be some like global warming or climate change, whatever, could be causing the Santa Ana winds to be a bit more intense. That makes sense. But I think the real problem is that their droughts
yeah,
are worse and of longer duration. So when the winds come, the there's so much dry fodder out there for fires that it just goes crazy.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, I mean, after Lahaina burnt down, was that 2023? I can't even remember. It's all blurring together.
I
And
think it
now
was
LA.
23.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah.
we're starting to see what the future is going to look like. We're going to start to have these crises that are going to affect cities. Cape Town, South Africa ran out of water a few years ago. And it was so bad, people were basically having to use sponges to take showers. So at some point, enough people will be affected by this, I guess, that maybe they'll realize, oh my God, we do have to do something about it. But it just doesn't seem like there's any serious momentum on the planet to do enough meaningful work on climate change, at least in the near future. And then, of course, Trump saying he's going to reverse everything that's been done so far. So we have at least 4 years of stalled out, no policies going forward, but we may have 4 years of policies being reversed at a time when we need to be accelerating and dramatically changing what we're doing. And I'm not I'm no saint in this, and I don't imagine there are many people. It's too easy to order on Amazon. It's too easy to get in your car and drive to a place instead of biking or walking. And I think we're overworked, underpaid, stressed out to the point where passing up the convenience and doing the right thing is just hard. And what we need to do is I think we need to just sit down as a planet and go, look, we're going to have to start giving up some things to make sure that our children have a planet they can live on.
Yeah, and I think that if you have that fairly rational discussion with people, they can kind of see it and they can agree. Uh, if you're having a discussion in the right context. But the problem we have, of course, is that we have a somewhat hijacked media environment and a great deal of fog in the air, and people don't even know what to think, and they don't know how to have, a reasonable conversation like that. It's kind of a mess, and I'm not really sure. Um, I guess I mean, we're getting toward the end of our hour, and I wonder if there's what are the solutions? What should we be doing right now um, for the good of everybody, Uh, ignoring the politics of the right or the left, or the up or the down, but what really should we be doing?
I mean, one thing we should be doing is putting trains back into cities. The more trains that we have, the less we're using cars. Trains are much more efficient energy wise. Um, the resistance against trains, Austin went through 16 years of trying to vote for it, and they finally voted for it, and now here we are 9 years later, and there's still no train. Um, I, I don't understand the resistance to trains. Like, what are you're worried like you're gonna be too close to people, or you want to drive in your little aluminum and glass deathmobile? Um,
Noise.
the noise. I mean, when you think
And
about it,
then,
you could be at your laptop the whole time with a headset on, doing whatever. Oh, watching TikTok. And with your
Well, I mean, it's
VPN.
neighborhood groups that don't want trains running close to their neighborhood. Even though, I mean, I can hear trains from where I live. They're freight trains, but I can hear
Yeah,
them.
right.
Yeah, when I moved to the Bay Area, I got to experience the inauguration of the first under the Bay BART train. I rode on that with Mayor Alioto. I was covering that for the news, and it was amazing. And there were so many people that were really against it. But once you rode on that, you realize I don't have trying to go across the Bay Bridge to San Francisco from the East Bay was it was a burden. I mean, you had to really want to go to San Francisco, but you hop on the train, you go over there, you'll be there in 20 minutes, and it cost you 60 cents back then. Boy, that was really tough. But a lot of people were against it. But it looks a lot better now than trying to pay for your car expenses, gasoline, or getting it charged somewhere. But I think trains are something that should really be on the menu of things to do. That's in the future.
Another argument I keep hearing is, well, I'll never use it. Yeah, okay, great. But all those other people that are on the freeway with you will, and as a result, there'll be less congestion. And instead of taking an hour to get to work, maybe it'll take you 20 minutes to get to work. And the fact that people don't recognize this just sort of blows my mind. Like, what weird alternate universe do you live in? The other thing that we need to do is we need to cut down consumption. Whether we like it or not, we need to cut down on the amount of food we're eating because we're obese and overeating. I'm definitely struggling with weight issues myself, so I'm calling myself out on this. And in addition to cutting down on food consumption, we need to cut down on just general consumption, like all the plastics we're using for packaging, just the amount of consuming that we're doing when it comes to, oh, I need this thing, and you get it and you just don't ever use it. And we're in a consumer society where one of the ways we get dopamine hits is by making purchases online. And the system is designed to reinforce the obscene consumption of goods because, right, that's capitalism in a nutshell. Not only are we accelerating the global warming issue by all this consumption, but think of all the plastics that we're wasting that we won't be able to use in the future. Plastic is such an amazing material. We're wasting it in a frivolous way on packaging. So in 50 years, our grandchildren aren't going to have as much available for them. And think of all the microplastics in our bodies that are, who knows what they're doing to us. And just simple conservation things, I think, could go a long way. The problem is it means there's going to be a bunch of rich people who, instead of making $1 billion in profit this year, might have to settle for like $100 million in profit, and they're not interested. And the working class isn't organized, and it isn't in unions, and so there's no way to have a conversation for the working class because they're divided against themselves. And so, this is where my hopelessness kicks in, and I'm thinking, what are we doing here?
Well, if you want to get rid of plastics, that's a problem. It's hard to recycle the plastics now. That was promised. We're going to recycle. We're going to make a whole new world out of those plastics that you're throwing away, and they've tried shipping it overseas. They don't want them anymore. All sorts of recycling is become kind of stalled. Electronics recycling is stalled. So it's really hard to do the right thing when the right thing is becoming impossible.
I think that recycling from the get-go, from day one, was always a lie. It was a way to make consumers feel less guilty about their obscene levels of consumption, because there was never any real attempt to create the kind of infrastructure to recycle. If you really wanted to do it right, either you don't buy it or you reuse it. And the idea that you're going to take a material, spend a bunch of energy transporting it, and then a bunch of energy converting it into a new product, and then somehow that was going to be efficient it's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense in a capitalist system. If we were socialist, maybe we could pull something like that off. Denmark is incinerating its garbage, including its plastic, and then using that to generate energy. But even like what we think of as the progressive leftist states in Europe that are supposedly on the front line, they're not even trying because it's just too ridiculous. I think Sweden is trying to create AI robots that'll go into the garbage dumps and pick out the material that can be reused. But that'll never be efficient. The best way to fix this is to just not use it.
Yeah,
And
don't use Amazon. Will fix it because have you noticed they are the biggest consumer of boxes? I
yeah,
mean, I actually ordered something from them, and it was a tiny little thing, and it came in a huge box inside another box, and it's like, okay, where did that come from? But that's the way they operate, and returns to them don't get put back in stock. They just throw it away.
they throw it away.
Yeah, and they're
Well, they
dumps.
put it somewhere. I think they try to sell those off.
Nah,
They they have mixed. So they have those giant containers that you can buy, and you don't know what's in them,
mm,
and then you can try and sell them off on your own, and they also throw it away. It's
yeah,
both.
yeah. There's a lot of dumps where people go and get good, unused appliances that were just dumped there because no one could find a home for them after Amazon got a return.
And the fashion industry does the same thing, right? The clothing that they didn't sell that year, they sell a bunch of it on sale, and the rest they destroy. And you think, okay, capitalism is Ouroboros, right? It's the snake eating its tail. We're consuming all these things at a rate that's not sustainable at the same time that we have out of control temperature rise. And it seems silly, but here we are. It's 2025. We're not making any progress
Well,
on this.
the other thing to consider is all stores have to keep their shelves full, right? Which means that they have product on their shelves that they're never going to sell,
Yeah.
right? You have to have more product on your shelves than people are going to buy in order for the shelves to always appear full. So they're kind of rotating that stuff out. So there's tons and tons of product that is never sold, never used, and who knows where it all goes, you know? I think they try to find sane ways to dispose of that stuff, but I don't know. I'd like to see a study of where that stuff goes. Actually, I've become increasingly interested in that and just kind of the overall waste. Though now that we have decided that we're all doomed, we have reached the end of our hour.
It's
Did
a
you have one
terrible
more
way to
thing you were going
end.
to say there?
Yeah,
Anything else,
so
Roy?
I guess I haven't lost hope yet, but I am in a dark place. I think the next 4 years are going to be, for me, the big scare is what's going to happen internationally, right? Like if uh, how much damage can he do domestically? I think like is the United States going to withdraw from NATO, for example? Germany has definitely decided that's so likely that Germany has decided to remilitarize, and they of course started the remilitarization more than 2 years ago, and their goal is to make it so that Germany has the third largest military on earth. It'll go United States, China, Germany, and then Russia will be fourth. So
Wow.
that's an upending of U.S. foreign policy post World War II, which was to keep Germany and Japan from remilitarizing. Japan now has 2 aircraft carriers. Right, we're in a new world where Germany and Japan are remilitarizing, and I don't. This is horrible, but it calms me down because they feel like they're a little bit more sane than most of the other states on the planet. It's scary when Japan and Germany are your hope. I'm
Well,
There's
if
got
part
to be
there's
some
German.
sane people out there.
if there are
Well,
dark
there
days
is.
ahead, I'm gonna order a bunch of flashlights on Amazon, and maybe not.
Nice.
Well, the good news is that with Netflix, Hallmark, Lifetime, etc., you could actually watch rom-coms 24/7 and never see them all for the rest
Wow.
of your life. So, you
Wow.
don't have
That's
to feel bad.
that's beautiful.
Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks so much, Roy, for joining us again. And we will publish this Monday, Inauguration Day, so that people will have something to think about.
I'm so
And
sorry.
we look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Roy.
Well-
Let's keep this up, the faith there, whatever that is.
I'm trying.
You may see us there in Dubai soon enough.
You're always welcome.
Save me a parking space.
Thank you, sir.
Will do. Take care.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Okay, bye, everybody. Off we go.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lipkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.